Welcome to the Local Dive Podcast. This is Alex Scott, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Ashlyn Portero and Dean and Sarah. How you guys doing?
Great. I'm excited for this to get rolling.
Yeah, doing good. Ready to start.
Awesome. Well, we're really excited to launch this new podcast. It's an opportunity for us to share our unsolicited and solicited deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. And so we're really excited to talk about Tallahassee, where we're on mission, and also things that we see happening in the church at a national level, at a global level, and ways that we lead at City Church here in Tallahassee. And so we're going to spend the next few minutes just kind of introducing ourselves a little bit, and then we'll jump into the content of the show and kind of walk through the various segments that we have set up for you guys today. We're really excited to dive in. Dean, there's a rumor that you are actually in a park somewhere in Tampa Bay as you record this looking for Tom Brady. Can you confirm or deny?
Well, my sister lives there, so I'm in regular communication about sightings. And just a heads up for everyone listening to this, just so you're not disappointed, I'm probably much more shallow than I am deep. I'm more of a sandbar guy than a deep sea fisher, just so everybody knows.
Hey, you know, sandbars are a great place to party. So, Ashlyn, as we kind of introduce ourselves, can you give us the quick, minute bio of Ashlyn Portero?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So I'm from Tallahassee. I moved around some growing up, but went to Florida State and have been here as an adult since 2006, which feels like a really long time ago, because it is. But yeah, so have been full-time on staff at City Church for I think 8 years, maybe 8 or 9 years. It all kind of runs together.
Is it in a bad way? I hope not.
No, in a great way. No, it's been awesome. So yeah, I serve as an executive director along with you, Alex, and am living life in Tallahassee. I'm 31 and a seminary student at Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. So I'm doing the online school life, which is turning out to be a lot better than maybe I expected. And I have a dog.
At the time we record, you and everybody else are doing the online
school
life.
Yeah, that's true. Everyone's an online student now. We're all distance. And I have a dog named Rainey, who I'm a little more than obsessed with. So, but she doesn't have an Instagram account, so I feel like that's I'm holding out on that.
Yeah,
so.
That's a good choice. Dean, what about yourself? Give us the quick intro on who you are.
Yeah, I'm a Tallahassee local, and I went away for college and seminary, but have been here besides that since I was 9 years old. I'm the pastor of City Church in Tallahassee, and a church I started with about 20 friends and family in my parents' living room. And I am someone who is just really unapologetically diehard local church. I believe it's God's mission to the world. And I have 3 kids. My wife and I have been married. Christy, we've been married for 16 years. And I have a pretty wide age range with my kids. Tommy is 13, Ty is 9, and Sally Ashlyn is 5. And we have a dog named Daisy, who I'm growing to like more and more. It's been an adjustment.
You're more of a dog person than maybe the vibe you put off.
I like dogs. I do not do Instagram dogs. so that's my line. So I'm good with you because of your dog love is fine with me. But I'm excited about this podcast and this conversation we're going to be having as we grow in this and develop content and think important things to talk about, because there's a lot going on in our country through the church, and I think it's important that we're talking about it, having important conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm Alex Scott. I have been on staff in some kind of capacity at City Church for the last 10 years almost, which is kind of crazy. Dean and Sarah has a really good way of adjusting life plans, and so I came to Tallahassee to go to Florida State and fell in love with City Church and was able to come on staff and eventually join in the ministry here. I've grown to love this city. It's a place I thought I would be for a couple years and then on to bigger and better, whatever the heck that means. And I really have kind of fallen in love with Tallahassee and excited about this podcast. I am married, and we've been to my wife Melissa. We've been married just over 8 years. We've got a almost 5-year-old foster son and a dog as well, Jackson. So things are quite busy around our house these days. So that's who we are. We're excited to jump in. So we've got a couple segments that we're going to try and have every week. If you maybe have noticed from the logo that we have a pool theme, and so we're going to go all in on that with the diving board. But the first thing that you want to do before you go for a swim is warm up. You got to ease into the pool. Mom told you 30 minutes after you eat. So this is kind of that period as we ease in.
And what a crock that is. We're so lied to.
Yeah, I never got sick jumping into the pool immediately after, but. So we're going to kind of jump into our first segment, which we're calling the warm-up, and this is really just a primer to where we're going to be spending most of our time in the deep dive segment of the show. And Dean, we have been in a series here the last 4 weeks at City Church called The New Normal, as we've talked about what it looks like to be on mission and a part of a local church in the midst of this COVID crisis. Can you just kind of talk and recap where we've been in that series and what that's looked like?
Yeah, I know using the phrase the new normal is almost cliche now, but it is reality. It's true. Like, everyone's normal did shift. But what did not shift is the mission of God. What did not shift is the Holy Spirit in our lives, that God is not on quarantine, and he never is. And the church needs to be reminded of that regularly. So we've been talking about really an encouragement kind of way to push people to how to live out just some basic Christian realities in their lives during this time. We talk about evangelism, what that looks like. Discipleship, how a lot of that right now is probably being experienced through trials. Our youth minister, Zach Meredith, preached through James 1, how God uses trials in our lives to build us up, to mature us, to develop perseverance in us as believers. And then we talked about generosity last week, how Christians are to see a need and meet a need, and how God has not gone on quarantine when it comes to evaluating our hearts. And our money and resources is really how he evaluates that. Where your treasure is, your heart is also. And also that it's really taboo for us to talk about money, and we have reservations about it so often. God has zero reservations about it. It's throughout the scriptures, so we need to point there. And then we're going to close the series out by talking about what fellowship looks like in the new normal, because that's kind of complicated. So I hope that our church is benefiting from it and is being encouraged on how they can still live out their faith during this time.
Yeah, I know as I've tuned in, I've been really encouraged by kind of all of the weeks as we've walked through that, and to realize that even though and we'll talk about this phrase a little bit more, but you said early on in a planning meeting that the moment may have changed, but our mission hasn't. And I think the way that you and Zach have preached through this series has just been really helpful in guiding my own heart in the midst of this crisis. As I kind of have and I think maybe most of us have this tendency to want to turn kind of inwards and say, okay, how do I keep myself safe? How do I keep my family safe? What about me? And really kind of it's allowed me to turn and say, no, what about those who are far from Christ? What about my neighbors who maybe need to be served with physical and kind of specific needs, but also spiritual needs? And so it's been a really good reminder for me as we've walked through it, just of kind of how I need to shift my view of the new normal.
Yeah, no, I think it's been good, even just to think about how, for a lot of us who the local church is a central part of our lives, and yet, now we're not able to actually gather together, and we're, watching on Sunday mornings this, like, our broadcast that we do, and yet, Dean, to your point about, obviously God's not quarantined, his presence is with us. And so just kind of thinking about how, I think it's a good challenge to remember that, like, the local church is a place that we come and gather and we grow within this community, and we have, discipleship when we're gathered together. And yet the mission of God, when we walk out the doors, we're still on that, and so there's kind of like this balance between, maybe for some people who viewed, going to church as, okay, I check my box for the week. Well, that's never been true. Like we're called to live all of life with a desire to be on mission for God, and coming together to church isn't, I think we're kind of being confronted with, like, I hope people are seeing that you're coming to church on Sunday isn't like you doing your religious Christian duty. And if you're viewing it that way, like, obviously there's a huge misunderstanding of what the role of the church is and what the call to Christ-likeness is. But rather, like, developing this love for coming together with the local body. And so I think that's something, excuse me, that this series has kind of spoken to, is like, things are not normal, like things are not how they should be. And yet in this season, like, let's talk about what some of these realities are, that we're designed to be together. And yet, even as we're not able to do that, how do we still pursue fellowship, pursue discipleship, practice generosity, do all of these things as we're scattered? But yeah, hopefully that will be something that allows people to grow, and I think have a better understanding of what the true meaning of coming together and coming to church actually is and is for. That was just sort of a thought that I was kind of thinking through.
Yeah, as we've kind of spent time in this series too, what are some things that maybe, we individually have grown in or have been challenged by thinking about the new normal, and also realizing, like, Ashlyn, I think what you just said was really insightful on the fact that, like, God is not quarantined. So the Spirit is still on the move, even in the midst of the church not being gathered together. But what are some things maybe that have, like, you've found in this season to be a good reminder or a good encouragement as we've kind of walked through this series?
I think the scope of digital reach, that's been really just neat to see, and how God's using that. How every kind of era of the church has maybe had some new developments that allowed them to take the gospel further. And for me, it means across the street, but in a way that can get to somebody's living room. In terms of what I'm talking about in this instance, I'm having friends that I see click onto our Facebook Live that have never been to our church before, and are sending me text messages and Instagram messages saying, "We watched today. Thanks for having it online. We loved it." I'm like, "What? Whoa, great!" And then my hope is that maybe that God will use this to maybe spur in their mind a willingness to give us a chance when we come back and start meeting together and come check out what the local church is all about. So that's kind of been the neat thing for me, is to actually see it. And I'm not talking about like 2 or 3 people. I'm talking like 10 or 12 people that I know, that I grew up with, or that I know locally, and that are watching our services online, which is just so great.
Yeah,
and fires me up.
I've been amazed by what I've called the low cost of entry for online, church, in a sense. And so I know it's so different than the gathered church, but to your point, Dean, like, I've seen friends that, I'm Facebook friends with on middle school, or from middle school, that I've posted, the sermon or the service, and they're tuning in and watching, and it's blowing my mind. And I mean, some of those aren't even in Tallahassee, but just the kind of the exposure that people have to the gospel right now has been really, really neat to see, and the conversations that have come from that.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, in terms of something that I think I've grown in this season, and trying to connect that to sort of this series that we've been in, is just this. I feel like I've heard from a lot of people, and I've experienced this myself, like, this maybe just like increased awareness of, like, what does my life look like? What does my walk with God look like? And having just sort of this hyper awareness where a lot of busyness and a lot of distractions have kind of been stripped away. And now just being able to look at that and say, okay, where does God have me on mission? What does it look like for me to pursue, the things that we've talked about in this series in my city and in my context. So I think that's a way that I feel like the Lord has been teaching me and has grown me, is just by, kind of being awake to this moment and saying, okay, God, you're doing a lot here. What are you teaching me? How are you going to use this season? Not for me to have like a deeper understanding of just myself, but of, my place on mission with God. And so I think that it has been a neat thing. And I've seen other people speak to that too, that when a lot of these kind of daily distractions of our lives have been stripped away, and those aren't all bad things in and of themselves, but just, I think the way that, this has sort of forced us into just a different way of living. My hope is that for people within our church, that they're able to have some time to actually kind of focus and maybe listen to this series and to what God is speaking through His Word in a way that, maybe we just weren't as attuned to before. And so that's something that, I think that kind of stripping away of some of just the daily distractions and the, kind of run of the day has been good to kind of explore.
Yeah, I think grown in maybe more of an understanding of what God does in the waiting and the longing. We talk about that Advent season, the kind of that season of anticipation and those type of things, and what those believers were doing during that time before the Messiah ever came. We see throughout the Old Testament people crying, "How long? How long, O Lord? When will you deliver us?" You see all those things over and over again. And while this is not the exact same as that, we have been delivered, by Christ, those who are believers. I've kind of grown in what that looks like for me. I think I've read more Psalms than I've ever read in my entire life. I've always enjoyed the Psalms, but I'm not reading them as my daily Bible reading. I'm like actually reading them because I'm looking to them, to point me to God. And I listen to a playlist the Gospel Coalition put out. I think it's called Songs of Comfort for Anxious Souls. I listen to it every day.
Are you anxious?
Oh man, you ever ridden next to me on an airplane before?
More than once.
So yeah, that's a lifelong struggle with me. I'm trying to, I try to do things I can to combat it and deal with it and treat it. But I've just really been that season of all the things we talk about at Advent becoming like a practical reality for me right now.
Yeah, there's been some actual opportunity in some ways for application of parts of our faith that maybe we haven't had to live out in kind of American Christianity and comfort in this season, as things have been stripped away. That there are things probably that we can more closely relate to brothers and sisters in terms of experience to brothers and sisters around the world who may not have the same material resources or comforts that we do. And so I think this has been a good and unique season. And I mean, we're only beginning to see what the Lord is doing in this time as we kind of live in this new normal.
Yeah, and I bring up my friends who I've seen tuning into our broadcast, and I'm not sure if this is what God is doing, but I almost feel like it's God encouraging me because Sundays have become just really hard for me. Now, I mean, I think our broadcast is fantastic. I think our whole team's doing a great job. But Sunday used to be I'm a pastor, right? And I love the local church. So I go to bed Saturday night fired up, I'm not getting to sleep because I'm pumped. And then I come in Sunday morning ready to party, Starbucks in hand, let's go, ready to go. But now Sundays are really hard for me. Like I'm in a pity party kind of way, but it's just kind of been really depressing for me Sundays. And I'm used to my house being full on Sunday night with friends. I'm used to, seeing people preaching, all those kind of things. And it's just been really tough. So to see those people that are engaging that have never been in our building before, I think, that's God's way of encouraging me on those days.
And I think too, like that's something that probably for everyone who's a part of the local church, but I think especially for church leaders, sort of this like very humbling moment that we're in of, okay, all of a sudden the sort of the life and the ministry, that I was used to, that we were all used to is now totally changed. And I've been thinking about that, and even to your point, Dean, of like, okay, here's what, in a good way, here's what I was used to, here's what my, life was filled with, and all of a sudden I don't have that anymore. And it just, I've been thinking a lot about, people around the world who are, who have been ministering through house churches and, underground and all of these different kinds of, not that that's not to compare, but just thinking about, for me, it's easy for me to get into the mindset of like, okay, this is how it is, and this is how it's supposed to be, and this is, this is how God works, and it's like, well, God's going to continue to work no matter the setting, but there's also that struggle of now everything is different that I was used to, and that I loved, and that I enjoyed, and was, maybe flourishing in, and so just kind of remembering like God's faithfulness in that. But I think that's a good point that, we're also having to ask ourselves right now, like, what does ministry look like? As we're anxious, as we're sad, as we're grieving, like having to really draw strength from the Lord and like just trust that like God's going to sustain us, because you also can't say, well, this is just a really hard season, and so I just I can't live on mission for God right now. I'm too burdened. It's like that's also not what we're called to do, and so I think that's something to speak honestly about too, is just what does it look like to lead and to serve, even as you are facing a lot of these emotions and these, anxious experiences, and just how, the Lord is faithful and the Lord does sustain us in that. But it is still hard and still worth speaking to. So I think that's just kind of an interesting and challenging moment that probably a lot of people find themselves in.
Yeah, as we kind of really kind of focus in for a few minutes and kind of take our deep dive into that statement that I mentioned earlier, Dean. I think you had said this in one of our service planning meetings where as we were talking about the new normal, you said the moment has changed, but the mission of God has not. And so the way that we do ministry, as we've talked about, looks different right now, and in some ways is probably going to look different for a long time. Hopefully we can gather sooner than later. But there's ramifications that go far beyond whenever we can gather normally again. And so as you guys have either, in your lives individually and personally, or as a church, how have you seen mission locally, kind of not shift, but kind of how have we had to shift our thinking on mission locally and what it looks like to be on mission when we can't be around people, when we can't gather?
One of the questions I've kind of been asking is just how is God working redemptively through all of this, even as a lot of our circumstances, even locally, even down to like very practical things like the way we go about our week. I'm realizing, we obviously understandably come to rely on our weekly rhythms as part of the way that we do ministry, so like I see these people, when I drop my kids off at school or when I go to Starbucks or when I go to the grocery store or when I, meet with my small group or my city group, every week, like whatever that looks like for you as a person, and those things being changed. But I think one of the things that I have noticed is just that, and I'm kind of going back to the busyness and the distraction, but I actually, from some of the people that I've talked to, have heard people say, and I've experienced this too, that there's maybe just like a simpler, more like real human connection right now. Like we're just craving that, because I think we've all seen that it's not enough to just exist on our phones and be on social media, and at the same time, we're not going through the same kind of cycle of the week with the activities and the job or the school, or and all of those, and even home rhythms are different. And so like this just genuine intentional seeking out for just personal connection, like just checking in on people, maybe doing the things that we had to put into our calendars before, because we're so busy. And so I think, I am excited to see how maybe the Lord uses that time where maybe some of like the image of an others focused life, or like the image of a family centered life, where like you're doing these things that look as if, you're living to that image, are stripped away. And now it's like, okay, what does it actually mean to live, for these things? And in terms of connecting that to mission, I just think that God is going to use that to kind of shape us and just shake up the way that we live. And I think as Christians, we have to be awake to that and say, okay, if my mindset is always to look for how God is leading me to share his truth, to share the gospel, to love others, then I have to, look for those opportunities as he reveals them. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't know what you guys think about that. Like how, maybe how is the Lord working redemptively through changes that we're seeing locally because of this season?
I think the need and love for hospitality is going to be stronger than ever once people get over the fears, of gathering together. Again, I think that you're talking about people are just so busy and distracted all the time. It's been so cool to see just people post I know some roll their eyes at it. I've actually loved it to see people going like, Young Life staff Zoom call reunion, or college roommates Zoom call, or, all the things that don't normally happen. Now they're getting all these people from the past, or people from even now that live in different cities, different states, there's 20 people on a call that are all catching up and those kind of things. I want church life to be that regularly for people, not necessarily a Zoom call, but once it gets back to normal, why can't you make it a priority that you're not too busy for your friends, that you're not too busy to stay connected, not too busy to do that? Throughout the scriptures, we're a people that need each other. We're a Bible of one another's, right? Especially in the church family. So I'm hoping that's what happens, that hospitality and having people over to your house becomes something you miss and long for, or something you weren't doing before that go, man, we need this personal connection. We need to do this. We need to see this missionally and also discipleship-wise, too, in terms of having people around you. So for us locally in Tallahassee, church life is just really stale here. There's some fantastic churches here. If I wasn't a pastor of this church, there's some churches I'd go to in a heartbeat. But church life in general is just kind of stale in our city, where you see a lot of Christians that just are indifferent towards a lot of things, the mission of God. I'm not trying to claim that I'm the captain of awesomeness when it comes to being a Christian in Tallahassee. But when you just kind of pull back and just kind of look at the landscape of our city, it's just kind of spiritually dry. So maybe God's using this to reawaken the church and make us less indifferent. Maybe the redemptive aspects of it could be a church that's just reawakened to care. To care more, like you were talking about very early, Alex, in this, care more about just the inward look. That we're not people that are just running in and getting toilet paper for ourselves and clearing the shelves. Right. That we're figuratively going, man, there's a lot to go around. There's a lot of work to go around. And that was probably a weird illustration of like bathroom and toilet paper. I'm not sure where that came from, but sorry.
It works in this season.
Forgive the visual. I told you shallow end. So, but that's just kind of what I'm hoping, is that there's just kind of this new, when I think of Tallahassee Church in general, I just think of, that includes some of our members. We're not perfect here. I just see a lot of indifference. And I don't know how you come out of this and be indifferent towards the mission of God and the church that you're a part of. So I'm hoping that's going to be a renewed care. I mean, I'm hoping that people start giving that never given before to their local church, that people are, that are finally giving it a chance, that all of a sudden they've been at church, they've actually been at church, they've been watching church. I want to be careful of that distinction.
Yeah.
We don't think, hey, let me miss church on a broadcast, but they've 7 weeks in a row that they haven't missed.
Yeah.
And they come to our gathering once every 7 weeks. What it look like for that to change? I think the Lord's doing something with all this.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been really encouraged by, and some of this is the season with the COVID kind of just crisis, and others is just the change in our life with our foster son. But I have had the opportunity to meet more of my neighbors in the last 6 weeks just by being on my driveway and playing basketball, and a really outgoing 5-year-old foster son who wants to know everybody's name and pet everybody's dog, that where I've gotten to meet more neighbors just because they're out more. And we're out more because we aren't running two different things that are happening. And so one of the things that I know I'm praying is like how I can be more intentional with my neighbors to see that hospitality move from a conversation 6 feet apart at the mailbox to, hey, I've gotten to know you over the last 6, 7, 8 weeks. What would it look like for you to come over and join us for dinner? What would it look like for us to, have a picnic in the front yard, just instead of, kind of standing at the mailbox and chatting casually? And so I'm hoping that really the Lord, and praying that the Lord will use this as a way to kind of engage more of my neighbors missionally, and to see conversations move from how's it going, you guys staying safe, to like, how's your heart in all of this? And so I'm really encouraged by that, and just the fact that kind of we've seen some, on a block that we've lived on almost 8 years, I now know more of my neighbors than I did,
Oh, yeah. I've seen I didn't know they lived there, driving around just a couple streets over. Have you guys noticed that most of the things you're talking about people being out more and outside, have you noticed that it's been happening in the evening?
Yeah.
Like it's an after dinner kind of thing, where you go to some of the people everywhere. I'm like, why weren't we doing this before?
Yeah.
It's just we're not talking about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay, we're talking about when most people in Tallahassee, with the exception of shift workers or late night nurses, those type of things, most people in Tallahassee are home, after 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. Why haven't we been outside walking around? And I'm not outdoorsy at all. Like I love the indoors. I'm passionate about hotels and air conditioning and all those kind of things. But so I don't mean like a hike or fishing or like camping, God forbid. But I mean, that's my worst nightmare is camping, just the thought of it. But I just love me a hotel, man. So where has this been before? And the answer might be we're just so overscheduled. I know it's cliche to say that, but we really actually are. Like it takes a quarantine to allow you to finally go take walks and to be out in your neighborhood when it's usually time. And I think we need to really look inside. Maybe, Ashlyn, your redemptive question, is the Lord revealing our idols? Like for a lot of people, is our kids' activities too much? It's just the idea of staying busy an idol in somebody's life. Is a calendar, a busy calendar, a to-do list? Can those things become idols in people's lives? It's just, I'm not trying to overthink it, but I just think it's really interesting that so much of the engaging with people is all being done when people are already home anyways, on a normal work schedule. Again, most people. That's just been interesting to me.
I keep thinking about I'm gonna go like into analyzing song lyrics for a second. So
come on,
wading into the deeper waters here. But there's a song that Sarah Groves, who's a Christian singer-songwriter, has called Expedition, and there's this phrase or these lyrics in it where it says, did you get an invitation to have nothing to show, to see the invisible goodness of deliberate and slow? And I don't know why, but like deliberate and slow has been this phrase that has literally just been sort of floating around in my mind for, like months, but definitely through all of this. And that's something that I see is just, we don't live, to me, I think in our sort of Western and especially like middle to upper class culture, we don't live these, slow, intentional lives. Like, I think we like to read books about living intentional lives, but and that's like, fun and attractive. But I think, in a lot, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'll just speak for myself, but I think it's easy for my natural inclination to be like, to look down on, deliberate and slow, because it feels unproductive, and if I don't produce a lot, well, then who am I, and how do people know my value? And so that's, I mean, I'm not saying that, everything we do is that like loaded of a thing, but I just keep thinking about that phrase. And I mean, because Dean, even to your point of like walks, like I do like the outdoors. And so I go to I'm all about the Tallahassee Greenways. I love them. But I take my dog out to the Greenways a lot. But a lot of times it's like I'm squeezing it in between things, or it's like, okay, I get home from work and I've got 45 minutes until the sunset. So I got to get out there, and I'm like dragging her along, I'm not really a journey person. I'm a destination person anyways. And so I'm like, let's go,
That is so true about you.
It's so
you
true.
Want no journey whatsoever.
Absolutely not. I'm like, get me where I'm going to go, and then I'll enjoy it. But, so even just thinking about the way that like some of my rhythms haven't changed in terms of like, I still take my dog on walks, I still go for a run, but it has been like, it's just been more intentional. And I guess I don't know, this sounds kind of cliche, but it's like, I feel like I'm more in the moment right now than okay, it's just another thing to check off on my list. And so I do hope that that's something that, we pay attention to, because I think that, we're not immune from that trickling over into, the way that we read our Bibles, the way that we think about people, like, is this meeting with this person, or is this lunch just the next thing on my list? Or is it a time for me to sit down and really enjoy the company of this person, and ask more questions than just trying to give empty chatter, and so just kind of thinking about how we truly are, being more deliberate and meaningful with the way that we go about our days.
And I think there's something really interesting there about the way that we can view local mission as having a mindset of being deliberate, and also the idea that it might be slow. I mean, I think that's one of the things that we've talked about a lot, and even as a church and as a culture, like, I think there's a tendency sometimes to think of mission and evangelism as like quick things. And sometimes the Lord does it really quickly, and praise God for that. But at the same time, like, I mean, Dean, I think you've told a story of inviting, a cousin of yours to come to church for like 8 years. It took her 8 years to finally come. Like, what does it look like to be deliberate and slow while also being urgent on mission? And I think like there may be some things even that as we kind of wait on gathering again and wait in this season, that like the Lord may be helping to kind of shepherd us through and show us about the fact that sometimes like we have an idea of what the timeline for mission should look like, and also the idea that the Lord is saying, no, like, be patient. This is like, I've got this, and I'm in control. And so just thinking about that and hearing deliberate and slow, I mean, because I'm really excited about some conversations that I'm having with friends right now who have tuned into the broadcast and who are kind of starting to ask questions about, the gospel and kind of pushing into those things. But at the same time, remembering that like, if it doesn't happen tomorrow, like, the Lord is still good and still in control and can still redeem that situation. And so how do I take that approach, kind of the long view? I think there's something to be said in ministry too there, like in kind of just plowing away in faithfulness over time in a mission field. But what does it look like to be deliberate and slow on mission while also remaining urgent? Because the fact is, like, tomorrow is not guaranteed. And so I think there's just a great kind of thing there. What are some things as we have led and as we have seen maybe at the national and international level, that as we think about what it looks like as a church to support mission beyond our city and beyond kind of our church family, what does that look like, and what are some things that we're seeing and ways that this is impacting that too?
Well, some church planting being slowed down, that's been kind of hard to see. Planters and launch teams that wanted to start Easter Sunday or somewhere along those lines. I think of some of our international church planters, especially our friends in London that had to back the launch date up. How can you not? I mean, it's out of their hands, out of their control. So that's just discouraging. I mean, again, we do believe that God has them there for a reason and that the church is going to be built. I mean, I believe that with all my heart. But it's just hard when you're fired up and have a date and you're building towards it, and all of a sudden it's like womp womp, and we all have our versions of that. Like for us, we weren't able to do Easter at the Civic Center and Good Friday at Ruby Diamond, and those are huge deals for our church. You know what else is a huge deal is the launch date for a new church plant. It's amazing. It's the most exciting thing in the world. It's like why you moved to that place to go launch. So that's happened, and then also just slowing some of our missionaries down in terms of some of the things they're able to do internationally. And again, their mission's still going, don't get me wrong, and they're probably doing the same things that we're doing, in terms of building relationships and in a different kind of way than normal. But some of the things they maybe set out to do goal-wise and task-wise and calling-wise there have all just kind of been slowed down a little bit. It just stinks to see that.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what because the way that we can move around the world or can't move around the world right now, is obviously different and changed. And so I'm curious to see what that looks like. In a way, I'm interested to see if this sort of, I'm thinking especially with like Americans and kind of our conquering spirit, if this sort of forces us to really invest resources and energy and, relational energy into, people who are already on the ground in other places and say, okay, that, just because we can't get somewhere doesn't mean that, the Lord's already there, and it doesn't mean that he's not moving. But at the same time, to your point, Dean, like it's discouraging especially when you're excited about the Great Commission and there's like this call to like get people around the world. And I think, for our church, as we've been trying to grow interest in sending efforts to then, kind of say, well, right now we can't really send people. I mean, if somebody was moving, like we could find a way to, make it work depending on where they were going to. But yeah, I'm just curious to see, like, I mean, some, right now, and I understand this, it can be scary to go to the grocery store, or to go into certain spaces where we are. And so, is that fear gonna follow us, as we're still trying to travel and to go outside of Tallahassee. But I also think that, again, the Lord's going to use that too. And hopefully, we'll at least get to see, places people continue to invest where they are. I mean, what we're talking about here locally is happening all around the world. And so just kind of, I think, praying for the mission to move forward in those spaces, and just, lifting people up in prayer and just asking God to, continue to provide for our missionaries and for churches that are being started, and knowing that the mission is going to carry forward. But it is just discouraging, to feel like we want to be, moving around and going, and that just has to wait for now.
Yeah, I think this has been a season in a lot of ways of like lamenting plans that just didn't come to fruition. And there's a part of that where you have to say, okay, when we planned this in, this thing and this trip in, 2019 or in January of this year, where it's okay to say, you know what, this didn't go the way that I thought it was going to, and I'm bummed about that. And at the same time, and hold the tension that the Lord is sovereign, the Lord knew, and the Lord is still ruling and reigning and moving and in control. And so I know, like, as a staff, we've had to do that. We've had to have times where we've lamented just the things that, like Dean, you mentioned Easter and Good Friday. I mean, I think of a baptism Sunday that we had planned. But and that was just sad. I think at the same time, though, like for me, there is like some missional fervor that is growing that I'm really excited to see, both locally and nationally and internationally, what happens on the backside of this crisis. Because I think there's going to be tremendous opportunity. Like this has, to your point, I think in the church and out of the church, exposed a lot of people's idols. And so like where we've put our hope and our comfort, and so the opportunity for mission is immense. And I think hopefully, I'm prayerful that the Lord will use this to make people urgent about the church and prioritize the church and the mission of God. And so hopefully we'll see people go like we've never seen go before, because they've realized the urgency in needing to go. We'll see planters have a renewed urgency. And even though they might be bummed about the fact that, okay, I'm now launching in October instead of April or whatever the case may be, that we'll see just this kind of movement of mission out of this, and an opportunity for people to really respond to the gospel for the first time. Are there things that, as you think about mission, that you've been encouraged by? I know we talked about like the access to services and kind of broadcasts online. Are there other things that you've seen, either in our church or in other churches or kind of the universal church, that has encouraged you in terms of missional engagement right now?
Well, I also want to add that I still hate COVID, even though all these things that God is doing. Just wanted to throw that out there. I wanted to complain real quick.
Cosign.
That I'm still anti, but pro what God's doing, hate the virus. So is that kind of like a love this? No, never mind. But what I think I've seen is a love for your town. I just think that's such a Christian posture and response is to really missionally what I'm seeing is like a love for your place. I think it's really in a transient world we're in. I mean, we see a lot of pastors that are not. This is wrong, but can you really love a place if it's your seventh church, that you've been pastoring at or whatever it might be? It kind of feels a little job-ish, more than that. And for us, it's just so much more than a job. This is like where we live. This is our place. This is our calling. To be in Tallahassee for wherever long God allows it. And I think we're seeing just a love of place. You're just seeing people like believers just really caring. Non-believers too, but like you just need to see believers care about local restaurants and how they're doing, and care about their local healthcare officials, and just really a love for people and a love for a place, which to me is just such a missional. Without that love for people in a place, it's really hard to get passionate about mission locally in your community. And that's just been something I've seen that's been just pretty cool. Like kind of like a rally for Tally, I think was what Madison Social, one of our local restaurant bars, called it.
Yeah.
A rally for Tally, which I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of really good things that have come through. And I mean, in terms of the pivot to the digital, I mean, I know for us as a church, like we've seen a lot of things kind of that we were able to innovate and push out quickly in terms of content and new ideas and initiatives that I think are going to sustain far beyond, what, kind of however this crisis shakes out. Like one of the things that I'm really excited about that we launched is a Instagram Live segment that we've called City Socials, where we're interviewing members and we're talking about what it looks like to be part of the local church.
It's been great.
And what it looks like for them to live on mission in their vocation, and kind of how they came to know the Lord, and the ways that they've been encouraged by being a member of the local church, really just to highlight church membership and church engagement and mission in our city. And so I'm excited for things like that, those conversations where people can really like hear what it looks like to live out the faith on a day-to-day basis. And so I've been excited by kind of the innovation and the change culture that I've seen in our church and kind of churches and missions agencies around the world in this season. Like the church has the best thing in the mission of God. And so I think that like we should have a strong desire to see the, kind of leveraging tools and resources to share the good news of the gospel in the best way and the kind of most, accessible ways that we can. And so I think we've seen a lot of really good things come from it in this time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all of that. I think that the way that people are innovating and are, thinking creatively and just being willing to like try new things, it's like all of a sudden we're kind of all in uncharted territory and just trying to do our best to navigate. And so it sort of, I think, levels the playing field a little bit in that, we're all kind of newbies to what we're in right now. We can look at how history has dealt with, plagues and sickness and other devastating times, but we're obviously in the context that we're in, and so we're having to apply all of that. I think it's just encouraging to see the desire for getting the gospel out and doing, I think about our staff, like doing what it takes to help people feel connected and to make sure that people are growing and that they're still able to to be part of the church, even as we're not able to gather in person. And so that I think is encouraging. And so, I hope that we continue to see just, more intention, just more commitment to living out the gospel and to living on mission, and hopefully, also having gratitude when we do, return maybe back to some more normal routines when school goes back and when, we're able to kind of move about, our city and life in ways that we were before. I hope there's also gratitude for rhythms, because even as, just we can say that, some distractions are being stripped away and stuff like that. I also think, I want to acknowledge that for a lot of people, it's really hard not to be at work right now, or not to be doing the things that they were doing before. And we get, purpose, and we get fulfillment out of a lot of the responsibilities that we have. And so I hope too that, I hope that we're able to kind of process all of that in such a way that we know that our identity is not in the things that we do, and yet the Lord gives us work and gives us commitments and responsibilities to shape who we are, and really to serve Him and to grow in Christ-likeness. And so I hope there's also just a gratitude that shapes, the way that we approach life and approach relationships and other people when we, kind of move forward.
Yeah. Well, we're going to transition and pivot a little bit after spending some time kind of in some meaningful conversation in our deep dive segment on mission. We also created this as a place to share some of the more trivial thoughts and things like in culture that we see and that, maybe irk us or that we love, or, whatever the case may be. And so we're going to move on into the shallow end, and we're going to spend a few minutes, in the moment that we're in. This is going to be kind of COVID-related, shallow thoughts. And so the first segment is something that we have had as a staff for a long time called our punch list. Some of you might be listening and thinking, oh, I know what that is. It's like the things that you want to get done and all the tasks that you want to accomplish. That's not what this is. This is a metaphorical punch in the face to things that just absolutely annoy you. And so what are some things in the midst of all this COVID craziness that you want to punch in the face? Metaphorically, of course.
Okay, I'll start. First, on a very just like light and insignificant note, pollen. Pollen is like at the top of my punch list, because if I need to be outside all of the time to like renew myself and keep my sanity and all of the other things that I say that I need to go outside for, I also just like can't breathe. And so every day I am like popping allergy pills like it is my job. So pollen is on my quarantine punch list. Also, more significantly, people who forget the meaning of the word abundance in terms of abundance of caution. So I've already started to see on Twitter where it's like we took an abundance of caution to flatten the curve and to respond to, all of this. And then now it's like, oh, we overreacted because things aren't as bad as we thought they were going to be, maybe where we are. And that's going to like drive me crazy. And I get that people are over it and that we're tired. So like I'm being sympathetic to that. But the whole purpose of an abundance of caution is like more than enough caution, like overflowing amounts of caution. And then it's like, so that's going to drive me crazy. It's like that. Literally the whole point is to like overreact in a sense so that we are overly careful. It's like if you're at the pool and you're like, I'm going to take an abundance of caution for my kid who like doesn't know how to swim, and I'm going to let them wear, water wings. And then it's like, oh wait, like my kid, I didn't have to go save my kid or have the lifeguard, dive in. It's like, yeah, because you took an abundance of caution and gave them floaties so that didn't happen. And so, yeah, that's just, I could keep going on, but that's my punch list.
Clearly that's a sore spot for you.
It is.
Dean, what it was on yours?
I am ready to Mike Tyson left hook. I'm not sure if that was his go-to move or not, but if it was, I'm sure he was good at it. The person that like any question or comment about just how things are immediately goes to, you want people to die. It's just like, can we chill out for 3 seconds, please? It's just like, oh, you just want everybody to die. Like our governor wants everybody to die because he opened the beaches back up. It's like, can you just chill for like a second? Like, I'm just going to guess he has a little more information than Mike on Twitter. I'm just gonna guess, that's been highly annoying for me. And so I don't need to go too far into that because I'll just.
We should
I was
just stop
going to say
there.
this entire segment probably needs an asterisk.
And the other one. This is weird for me as a sports fan, such a big sports guy. I want to punch replays of former games. I just don't.
Interesting. I would think you'd be. I think you'd have it queued up.
I love documentaries and highlights and those kind of things, but like, I don't care about watching on ESPN, not some fringe network, like main prime. I'd rather just watch documentaries at like 30 for 30s every night. Instead, it's like the 1993 replay of the Bulls versus the Nets. It's like, what?
Who cares?
Yeah, it's like, I don't care. Show me a highlight or a dunk or something. So that's just kind of, that has been annoying for me. Like every night it's like, we're going to watch the 1997, Chargers versus Chiefs. I'm like, first of all, the Chiefs uniforms look like McDonald's. Let's just be honest. Look like Ronald McDonald. So I don't want to watch that.
That's going to be a topic for another shallow end, is how you rate sports uniforms and why that's such a passion of yours. But we'll get there later.
And my opinions on those are inerrant, just so you know.
Good to know. Yeah, I think for me, so obviously as you're listening, you can't see this, but I wear glasses, and I am 1,000% from just a pure vanity standpoint over masks. Like, I'm for PPE, but my glasses fog. So I don't really know if it's safer for me to potentially not be exposed to the virus or to run into a wall because I can't see. And so I'm really over masks. I'm tired of them.
Yeah, what if you're accidentally right on top of somebody in the grocery store because, you're trying to breathe.
Exactly.
So Alex wants everybody to die. That's what it is.
There you go.
That's what we're hearing from that statement.
But out of an abundance of caution, I'm going to keep my mask on.
I've also noticed just how bad of a person I am as well in my need for Jesus. like I'm not wearing masks into the grocery store because I care about others. I've realized I'm wearing masks because I care about myself being judged and stared at. So
yes.
I just realized how inward focused I am. Because before masks really became declared you got to wear them, I went into Whole Foods. Which usually Whole Foods is you're required to wear Birkenstocks and be a girl who doesn't shave her armpits.
Oh my
but I do like some Whole Foods, and so I go in there. I'm the only person without a mask, and you'd have thought I walked in and said God bless America, at Whole Foods, or something like that. And that's a weird example, but a lot of people who go there don't like America very much. So, the stares, I was like, I am never. So I texted a friend of mine. I was like, do you have any extra masks at your work? And the person hooked me up with a little bag of them. So I have them in my car, and when I go in Whole Foods, I put them on, and nobody looks at me weird. So,
no more judgment. Yeah,
What do you buy at Whole Foods? That's what I want to know.
I ate a lot of fruit, believe it or not. So I get a lot of, I restock on that, and I get a lot of cheese. They carry Sweetgrass Dairy there from Thomasville.
Oh,
so
nice.
So I get that there. I'm a big night cheese guy with other things.
You shop the perimeter at Whole Foods.
Yeah, yes.
The weird stuff is in the middle aisle.
I'm a perimeter Whole Food shopper. I appreciate that.
Interesting.
That is what I do.
Interesting. I like it.
Yeah, that was not the answer I was expecting, to be honest.
I'm a perimeter Whole Food shopper. Yeah, that's okay. I feel good about that.
Yeah, there you go.
Anything else you guys want to punch when it comes to COVID?
I'm sure that there are a lot of things, but the one thing that is redeeming it all for me are the memes.
Yes.
Oh, they're amazing. Oh my God.
We are
how many do I send you a day?
We are at peak creativity right now in our country, and I just, I'm grateful for it. It's getting me through.
The memes give me hope that we can actually find a cure, because if we can put this much effort and creativity into silly little things that don't matter, like the people who actually care about this and are working hard to find a vaccine and a cure, it gives me hope because the memes are that good.
Everybody needs to follow Ashley Rutland on Instagram. Ashley's in Dothan.
She's got some good ones.
Her husband is the pastor First Baptist Dothan. She actually lived in Tallahassee for a while. She went to Child's High back in the day, and she's the best Instagram meme COVID person there is. So just wanted to give her a shout out and recommend people follow her.
Yeah, one last thing that I will throw on my punch list before we move to our last segment is the phrase, and I've seen it a lot in COVID, and I saw it before then, is "I did a thing" when announcing some change or some major life event.
So I did a thing. Here's a picture of my new hair.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
Exactly. Just say, I got a haircut. This is my dog. The "I did a thing." It's okay, we get it. I don't know, it just drives me nuts.
No, I get that. That triggers me because my AP Lit teacher in high school, Mrs. Mullally, who's one of my idols, she would really get on to us if we used "thing" in an essay. So you had to just say what it was. So she would have been all about that too, because anytime we wrote "thing" in an essay instead of the object or just what it was, we got marked off. So that's kind of your real life version of that.
Yeah, "I did a thing" is my thing. that I cannot stand. So please don't.
I
Don't
did
use
a
that.
thing. Here's
Don't
my new
use that phrase
Here's
around
my
Alex.
puppy I bought. Here's my new tattoo. I did a thing.
Yes, exactly. Just tell us what you did. All right. So the last segment, as we kind of wrap up this first episode, is a segment that we're calling Local on Tap, where we spend just a few minutes talking really specifically about Tallahassee and kind of the local context and the city that we get the opportunity to minister in, and also the city that we all love. And so as things have been, pretty much shut down in Florida until a couple days ago, we've had the opportunity to kind of re-engage with local businesses and restaurants and things like that. So it's kind of a two-part question. What are businesses that you were determined to keep open during the shutdown, and what are some things that you are glad are back that you look forward to continue supporting here in Tallahassee?
Oh, 1,000% Koosh. Yeah, it's just my favorite lunch spot in Tallahassee, dinner spot, everything. It's my favorite kind of casual family eating kind of restaurant. And they did a really good idea they had the regular menu for takeout, but they also did a weekly like family meal that fed they said it fed 4, it fed like 8. And at a pretty good price for all the food you got. And we decided we're going to get one every single week during this time. We're getting one actually tonight. And opening day, Alex and I actually had lunch there.
We did.
Their first day back. And we felt safe. There wasn't only like 6 tables full. They spread everybody out. But that's one of that was a big one for me. And I went to Starbucks every single day during quarantine. I've gone through the drive-through, and now you can do mobile orders again. So there's this long line at Trader Joe's, Starbucks here, the one on Thomasville Road that goes out to Thomasville Road. And I just pull right in. I'm like, I think I'm the only person who does it. I just pull right in, walk out, get my mobile order, walk back in, put sanitizer on my hands, and head on out.
Is the biggest problem you've had in quarantine no refills at Starbucks?
Oh, it's been awful. Absolutely awful. Now, one of my Starbucks, I can't say who, when I go through the drive-thru, they're open very short hours. They actually give me 2 drinks because they know I like my refills. Yeah, like I'll order in the drive-thru, and they'll actually go, "Hey, Dean, we got you." And they'll give me a refill with it, which is pretty cool.
It's when you know you have a problem.
Yeah.
What about you, Ashlyn?
I got people, man.
Okay, so 2 businesses that I am determined to do my part to keep in business. One is Midtown Reader. Got to support my local bookstore. So I've been not intentionally not buying books on Amazon, and they have a warehouse that they can get pretty much anything from, or they'll order it for you. So, and they've been awesome. Like, they will literally deliver to your house if you want them to. I go and pick mine up just because I'm at my house all day and I need to, even if I just have to drive a mile, that's exciting for me. But yes, Midtown Readers, I've been getting my books through them. But I am excited to go in and browse. It's not the same just to walk up and get my sad little paper bag that has my books in it and then go home. I'm like, am I even going to read these? Part of me coming here is just to walk around and look at the books.
You're building a library. It's an important thing.
Exactly, I am. So I am excited to be in Midtown Reader in the flesh and just get to stand there and stare at all the books one day. And then Bagel Market is my bagel place on the north side.
That is your spot.
I love it. It's mostly me and retired old men who go on. I'm there usually on Friday mornings, but it's awesome. And so I'll go usually on Fridays or Saturdays. I'll go and pick up breakfast. And they now just call me Ash. They don't even say Ashlyn. The last time I was there, they were just like, Ash, and I just stood there on my phone, waiting for my order. I'm like, oh, it's probably somebody who works here or whatever. And then finally they were like, Ashlyn. And I was like, I feel like it's when your mom uses your formal name because she's mad at you or something. So
when they get to the middle name, that's when you know.
Yeah,
you're
when they
really
work
in.
Brittany in there, and then I'll really know. But yeah, so Midtown Reader and Bagel Market, those are my 2 spots.
Cool. Yeah, so every Wednesday for me, it was in kind of the stay-at-home order. I would get coffee every Wednesday morning from Lucky Goat because their cold brew is amazing. And if you drink hot coffee, you're doing it wrong. Cold coffee is the way to go. Just random fact there. But Lucky Goat, Talicinos all day, and then Koosh's. I made sure to get takeout every week from. And then this is a local business, and I can say this because the operator of my preferred store is a church member. But Chick-fil-A, I mean, I have worked very hard to maintain my red status and keep Chick-fil-A. Not that they need my help keeping them in business, but I have loved supporting Chick-fil-A.
Well, let's keep in mind how many people Steve employs.
Yeah.
I mean, so say it's local or not local. It's definitely a local business. It's locally operated, owned, and it gives a lot of people jobs.
Yeah.
So one thing is I've never gone here before, but one of my life goals is to get to a point where I can call Ashlyn Ash.
I mean,
if Bagel Market can do
relatives
it,
and Bagel Market.
I figure I'm about 2 years away.
Yeah, maybe. It depends how those 2 years go.
I haven't
think.
decided if I like it or not. Like with my family, it's more just like this is what it is, and I just accept it, you know. But
You don't have the opportunity to control that.
right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Cool. Well, this has been fun. We are excited about the continuation of the Local Dive. We'll be back next week with another new episode. Thank you guys so much for joining us and for listening. We hope that you will subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And also, we would love for you to leave a review, please 5 stars, and let people know about the Local Dive. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Local Dive Podcast, a podcast where we share our deep and shallow musings about Christ, the church, and culture. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we'd encourage you to subscribe, and we'd really appreciate if you'd leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also continue the conversation with us on social media, on Instagram and Twitter, at the Local Dive Pod. We'll see you next week as we dive into another episode.